Welcome to another episode of Not Another Yoga Class podcast / LinkedIn live series. Today we have an amazing guest, my friend Lisa Lloyd, who is the founder of It's Time for Change, a psychologist who helps companies create happy, healthy environments that lead to insane levels of performance. And today we've got a really interesting subject. We're going to talk about holding up the mirror, why companies need to hold up the mirror and almost identify and accept the flaws within their organization. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Jamie. It's funny seeing you today, being just kind of in our country and not in your exotic, lovely place.
I know, but I've still held on to my tan. So
Yeah, you have. You're looking at. Yeah.
I've also got a very generous ring light that makes me look a little bit orange.
You've got a definite nice glow there.
Thank you. So yeah, let's talk about organization. So why is holding up the mirror, actually identifying and accepting your flaws as an organization, so important?
Well, there's so much to say in this. One of the things that I read last week was around the Harvard Business Review. They wrote a brilliant publication around care washing and talking about the fact that actually companies they know they should be doing something around looking after employees and making sure that they are healthy and they're happy and they're performing well. But what they're tending to do, well, they don't know how to do that, or they're wanting to avoid looking in the mirror. So they are just grabbing whatever they can from all over the place, stuff that's been marketed really well, or they've just heard of because their mate's doing it, or they happen to have stumbled upon it. And actually people are becoming overwhelmed with so many different things going on. It's almost like these add-ons that are making everything very noisy and adding on lots of layers of complexity. And in itself, it's now becoming overwhelming. And I think when organizations strip back all those levels and all those layers of complexity and just get rid of all that noise and go, right, what's really going on in our organization? Let's get to the root causes of what's happening. There's a whole heap of stuff that we can uncover that makes a real difference to how people feel and how they engage and how they perform. But there are lots of different reasons people don't want to do that. Sometimes because they don't know how, like they don't know how to create that safe space to find out what's really going on. Sometimes people are really anxious about looking in the mirror because if I look in the mirror, the finger might be pointed right back at me and I'm part of the problem. And I think that fear stops a huge number of people. I'm then part of that responsibility, like why things aren't as good as they can be. And I'm then obliged to do something with it. So the finger's now pointing at me. Everyone knows that. I've now got to do something about it and fix this. And that's quite scary.
It's terrifying. No one likes to see where they're falling down, where they're flawed, right? It takes a lot of boldness and bravery. It's something that I've started doing in my life. If I've made an error, I try and own up to it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
What I found is nothing bad happens.
Yeah.
None of that fear or the denting of the ego or anything. No one thinks worse of me. Nothing bad happens. Only good comes from it.
Yeah. And I think when it is that sense of most people in a leadership position or a manager position have not had training. They haven't had adequate support. They are overwhelmed themselves. So they're not making the best decisions. People have not been prepped to do to know how to do things. And so when we can be vulnerable and just say, look, actually, I've been doing it like this, and I'm not sure it's the best way of doing it. So I want to rethink. And that vulnerability, that openness to learning and finding out what's really going on from the people around me opens up a platform for people to have a voice and to say, well, you know what, I don't want to be going to this initiative every Thursday, or I don't want to be having to check in, with a obligatory kind of team meeting thing which is supposed to be a social thing every whatever night. Actually, what I want to do is to make my workload more manageable, or I want to know that if I've got a concern about something, I can speak up about it, or, all these things that actually get in the way of how we feel. So I think when we expect a lot of leaders and managers to be able to create the right environment, the right space to be able to have those conversations. If they haven't had the support, just being able to say, I want to try something different. I'm not entirely sure how. And being able to reach out and access some resources that can support them. Say, we're going to try this today. And as a team, we're going to go through it together. And then at the end, we're going to say, was that any use or not? Like, did that really help or not? Or I'm going to try approaching a conversation a different way, or I'm going to try and have check-ins in a different way. But I want you to tell me, is it working or not? Like, what could I be doing differently? And it's that vulnerability and that openness to just saying, I want to do something different. I'm not entirely sure how it's necessarily going to look, how it's going to feel, whether it's going to work or not, but I know something different needs to happen.
And how bad can this get? Let's say we find those senior leaders, individuals that don't want to be vulnerable, don't want to hold up the mirror, don't want to investigate and find out what the problems actually are, what people need, how they need to feel supported. Those organizations, what's the ramifications of it? How bad does it get?
Well, there are two kind of scenarios that I see. One is that if you've got a whole leadership team who are very much kind of turning the mirror away from them and just saying, we're fine, we don't need to learn anything or change anything, then people are walking. And we're seeing that in companies now. What's really interesting, and I'm seeing more recently, is that a growing number of leaders are really open to taking a new approach and to having the conversations that need to happen, and recognizing that everyone actually is part of the problem or the challenge, and everyone then has a part to play in how to change that. So when you've got a number of leaders on board with positive change, and then you've got a minority, one or two, who are not on board, the majority are now starting to call out the minority. And it's really powerful. I was having this conversation with some people last week who were asking exactly the same question. What do we do in our organization when we've got one person who's stuck their heels in and is refusing to budge? And I was sharing with them the story about a leadership team who are all, they're saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they're holding each other to account. And then when one person isn't doing it, or they're not engaging in the conversation, they're not open to learning and developing, it's the peers who are calling them out. And that is incredibly powerful. And then the people at the top of the organization are seeing that. It's no longer a kind of minority voice, it's a majority voice saying, look, we need to do something different.
Okay, so how would that look then for any organization that maybe is listening to this thinking, do you know what, I can see this. There's strong, stubborn levels of hierarchy, and we're not getting through to people, we're not doing it right. What can they start to implement that would help?
So having a space on a regular basis where the right people are coming together. So the people who are actively engaged in this sort of work, or they are curious. So if people are just open to reviewing practice and exploring how we do things, and potentially using data to look at how we do things differently, they don't have to have the answers, but they're just interested enough, getting them around a table and starting to go through a process, whether it's a process like the one that I run with Gemma Ellison, where we call it Leadership Labs, and it's essentially about creating the space for people to get together and talk about what is the issue, what's the challenge, how do we know it's a challenge, what's our hypothesis about it. So we're really kind of understanding what the root cause is, and we're being a bit scientific about it rather than just ad hoc grabbing at whatever we happen to come across. And then what do we think in an informed way, because we're having conversations, we're almost in group coaching to unpick what's really going on, what our resources and our strengths are, what's one tiny thing we think we could do differently. And as soon as you can kind of design a slight change and you go away and you test it and you come back and you evaluate it, that adds momentum. You then suddenly got people going, oh my gosh, this works. And we're not buying into something really expensive. We're not having to introduce a whole new program or anything that's really complicated. We are literally having the space and the permission to talk about what needs to be talked about, to go away and test stuff out, and then come back and review it as a group. And then that is the power of that. And when people start to see the positive change, that's when you get the skeptics on board going, actually, maybe there is something in this.
I love that. So start small and get some wins under your belt.
Yeah.
And then use that to turn those heads that previously would not be turned.
Yeah. And it definitely starts small, because we tend to and this is another bugbear of mine, when people want to kind of get involved with doing some change stuff, whatever that looks like, and they're like, let's write this whole program and let's plan out what's going to look like for the next however many months. And it's almost kind of everything's pre-planned, and actually you need to just start with, let's have a conversation, let's put into place some tiny changes, and then let's see what happens then. And then you decide, okay, what's next? Now we've seen that. Do we want to carry on building on that particular change? Are we now going, wow, that's possible, so now we can do this over here? We hadn't even thought about that. So it's about these things, I think, for me, growing organically. So really being agile, kind of looking at what's going on in the organization right now and what do we need to do right now to move on just a little bit. And then those little tiny steps get quicker and quicker because you get more and more people on board. Everyone gets behind it.
Brilliant. Tell us a little bit more about Leadership Labs. Who's it for? Who can get in part, and how do they access it?
So Leadership Labs are for any leader. It's really interesting, isn't it, the concept of leaders who are leaders. So there are obviously the kind of main leaders in an organization, senior leadership team. Managers are leaders of people, but we've also got people who are leading organizations to be kind of fit for the future of work. So it's thinking about how does our organization work at strategic level, and so on. So it's about someone who's interested in leading an organization or people forward. And if they are interested, if that's their role, and they're interested in joining a lab, there are two different types. One is about an in-house lab where we come and work with your group of leaders on the challenges specifically identified in your organization, maybe by a survey or just by experience, whatever data you have. The other one's an open lab where any leader from any organization can come along and be part of the peer group with people from other industries. And the power of that is huge in terms of that kind of peer coaching and experience and learning.
I love that you get almost industry agnostic in your approach, because there's so much to learn outside of your own industry, which is something that I've learned recently.
And all the challenges we come across, they're the same challenges. We have we have on the website, and you can put the comment of the link to that with this show. Wow. But the on that we got sort of we call them test tubes. They're the topics that people tend to choose to focus on in a lab, because they're the same things that come up. How to have those tricky conversations, how to lead effective change that your people are coming with you. All these things, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you're dealing with people, you're dealing with some of the same things.
Brilliant, amazing. And so can you just tell us again where we would find access to that? We can go via your website.
Go via my website. Yeah, it's timeforchange.co.uk, and there's a little tab called Leadership Labs. And if you click on there, there's information about in-house labs and open labs. And anyone booking a place on the open lab before the 21st of July will get a discounted summer discounted place. So people have to get in quick. So it depends when this is going live or this is going out.
Is this what you guys call summer?
Yeah, the rain, the clouds, yeah, the hoodies. This is it.
You should see how many layers I've had on the last few days. It's embarrassing. Honestly, I think that global warming feels like a lie right now. It doesn't feel like it exists.
I know, it's quite disappointing.
Yeah, maybe it'll come back. Anyway, Lisa, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed that chat. We'll put It's Time for Change in the notes of this episode. But it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie.